My phone buzzed with a text from my brother, Daniel. It was a picture, a grainy photo of my wife, Amanda, having dinner with another man. "Nate, we need to talk," the text read. "I think she's cheating on you." I was 3,000 miles away on a business trip, and my own brother and sister were trying to detonate my life with a single photograph. They thought they were lighting the fuse to my divorce. They had no idea they had just handed me the evidence I needed to finally end a war I never even knew I was fighting. My name is Nathan. I'm 49 years old, and for the last 2 decades, I believe my greatest accomplishment was the successful construction business I built from the ground up. I was wrong. My greatest accomplishment was unknowingly surviving the systematic, 2-decade-long campaign of psychological warfare waged against my family by my own flesh and blood. My younger siblings, Daniel and Sophie, were the architects of this war. To the outside world, we were a close-knit family. To me, they were my trusted business partners and my best friends. In reality, they were parasites, and I was the host they had been slowly bleeding dry for my entire adult life. And my wife, Amanda, she wasn't just the woman I loved. She was the silent, solitary soldier who had been fighting them off in a secret war to protect me. A war that had been raging since the day we said, "I do." The photo was their final desperate move. I was in San Diego for a 4-day conference. The man in the picture with Amanda was her old college friend, Mark, who I knew was in town for a visit. It was a perfectly innocent dinner. But in the photo, cropped and taken from a distance, it looked intimate, suspicious even. Sophie followed up Daniel's text with a phone call, her voice a perfect symphony of feigned concern and sorrow. "Oh, Nate," she whispered. "We didn't want to be the ones to tell you, but we've been worried for a while. She's been so distant, always on her phone. We think she's planning to leave you and take the kids." It was a masterful performance. Every word a carefully chosen drop of poison. They thought they were planting a seed of doubt. They had no idea they were watering a seed my wife had planted 20 years ago, a seed of truth that was about to break through the surface and strangle them both. 20 years earlier, I was a different man, young, ambitious, and utterly blind to the true nature of my own family. I had just married Amanda, the love of my life, a brilliant, kind woman with a backbone of steel, and I had just taken over my father's small construction business. I brought Daniel and Sophie into the company, giving them both senior positions and generous salaries. I thought I was building a family legacy. They saw it as their personal piggy bank. In those early days, they loved Amanda. They took her out for lunches, bought her gifts, welcomed her into the family with open arms. It was all a performance, a love-bombing campaign designed to win her trust. About 6 months into our marriage, they made their move. They sat her down, a bottle of expensive wine on the table, their faces warm and conspiratorial. They explained to her how the business really worked, how they would slightly over-invoice for materials, how they'd use company accounts for personal expenses, how they'd write checks to shell companies they controlled. "It's just how the game is played, Amanda," Daniel had said with a charming smile. "Dad did it, and now we do it. It's how we afford the nice things. Nate's too honest. He doesn't have the stomach for it. So we handle this side of things for him, to protect him." They were inviting her into their conspiracy, trying to turn her into an accomplice in the robbery of her own husband. Amanda told me about this conversation years later. She said she just looked at them, a chill feeling washing all over her body. "I will never steal from my husband," she told them, her voice quiet but unshakable. "And what you're doing is not playing a game, it's theft. It stops, or I'm telling him everything." That day, my wife drew a line in the sand. She had no idea she had just declared war, a silent, brutal war that would last for the next 20 years. They knew she had them cornered. If she told me, their lavish lifestyles would come to a crashing halt. So they changed their strategy. If they couldn't corrupt her, they would destroy her. Their campaign was subtle at first, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. They started planting seeds of doubt in my mind. "Amanda seems a little stressed, Nate. Is the pressure of being a mother getting to her?" Sophie would ask, her voice laced with concern. Daniel would accidentally let slip that Amanda had been having long private phone calls. Probably just her sister, he'd say with a shrug, knowing it would fester in my mind. They intercepted messages, forgot to tell me about important school events that Amanda had to handle alone, and then used my absence as proof that I was a neglectful husband and she was an overwhelmed, unhappy wife. All the while, the business was struggling. Profits were mysteriously shrinking. I was working harder and harder, but we seemed to be constantly on the edge of financial disaster. I couldn't understand it. I'd spend weeks on the road, securing big contracts, only to come home and find our margins had evaporated. I never suspected the thieves were sitting across from me at family dinners, asking me to pass the potatoes. And through it all, Amanda was my rock. She never complained. She supported me, encouraged me, and managed our home and our children with a grace and strength that I took for granted. I saw her as my partner. I had no idea she was also my secret bodyguard, silently deflecting the daggers my own siblings were throwing at my back. She never told me about their initial offer to join their scheme. She never told me about the constant, passive-aggressive war they were waging against her, because she knew the truth would break my heart. She was trying to protect me from my own family. Lying in my lonely hotel room in San Diego, staring at the picture of my wife, I felt oddly strange. For 20 years, I had been living in a fog of stress and confusion, never quite understanding why my marriage felt so hard, why my business was always a struggle. This photo, this blatant, clumsy attempt to frame my wife, was so out of character with their usual subtle tactics that it felt desperate. Why now? Why this? The question swirled in my mind, and I suddenly realized the answer wasn't with Amanda. It was back at the office, in the numbers I had been too busy and too trusting to ever truly scrutinize. I cut my trip short. I told Daniel and Sophie I had a family emergency and was flying home immediately, and to not tell Amanda, as I wanted to surprise her. The lie was bait, and they took it, thinking their plan was working. But I didn't go home. I landed in Charlotte, rented a car, and drove straight to my office in the middle of the night. I let myself in with my master key and went straight to the accounting department. For 20 years, I had trusted Daniel to manage our books and Sophie to handle procurement. I had been the face of the company, the one who brought in the work. They had been the ones who managed the money. I started pulling invoices from the last 10 years, cross-referencing them with project budgets and supplier price lists. And there it was, not a single, massive act of theft, but a slow, systematic bleeding, a million tiny cuts. Sophie was using a shell company, a fake materials supplier, to over-invoice every single project by 10 to 15%. She would approve the payment, and Daniel would cut the check to a P.O. box he controlled. It was a simple, elegant, and devastatingly effective scheme. I spent 6 hours in that office, the quiet hum of the servers the only sound. By sunrise, I had calculated the total. Over 20 years, my own brother and sister had stolen just over $2.4 million from me, from my family, from Amanda and my children. The numbers on the page told a story of financial betrayal. But the real story, the much darker story, was one I was about to learn from the one person who had been fighting for me in secret all along. I drove home, a thick file of incriminating evidence on the passenger seat, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. Amanda was in the kitchen when I walked in, and her face went pale when she saw me. "Nate, what are you doing home?" I didn't answer. I just walked over to the kitchen table and laid out the files. The fake invoices, the bank transfers to the shell company. She stared at the papers, her eyes widening in horror. "What is this?" she whispered. "This," I said, my voice hoarse, "is where our money has been going for the last 20 years. This is why we've always been struggling. This is Daniel and Sophie." I finally looked at her, my eyes pleading for an answer to a question I was terrified to ask. "Did you know?" I whispered. "Did you know about any of this?" And then I saw it, a flicker of something in her eyes. Not surprise, but a deep, soul-crushing weariness. and she finally broke. The dam of secrets she had been holding back for 2 decades finally burst. Through tears of anger and exhaustion, she told me everything. Their offer to her on that first year of our marriage, her refusal, and the relentless, silent war they had waged against her ever since. A war she had fought completely alone to protect me from the devastating truth about the people I loved. Her confession was a tidal wave of pain and revelation. The cheating accusation wasn't the point. It was just the final bullet in a 20-year war. And I finally knew who the real enemy was. The only question was, what was I going to do about it? A lesser man might have called the police. A lesser man might have filed a lawsuit. But I realized that would be too easy. Jail time and financial ruin were punishments, yes, but they wouldn't heal the wound. No, their crime was against family, and their judgment had to be delivered in front of the family. They had tried to destroy my family in the shadows. I was going to expose them in the bright, unforgiving light of a family tradition. Thanksgiving was in 2 weeks, and as was our tradition, it was my turn to host. I sent out the invitations to the entire extended family. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, and, of course, to Daniel and Sophie. I called them, my voice a perfect imitation of a broken man. I told them the photo had opened my eyes, that Amanda and I were in counseling, but that things were very rocky. I played the part of the wounded husband they had always wanted me to be. They ate it up, offering fake sympathy and empty platitudes, all while celebrating their impending victory. They thought they had finally broken me. They thought they were coming to my home to witness the final, crumbling ruins of my marriage. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. On Thanksgiving Day, my house was filled with the warm, comforting smells of turkey and pie. My children were running around, laughing, excited to see their cousins. Amanda was a vision of calm and strength, moving through the day with a quiet, powerful grace. We were a team, finally united against a common enemy. Daniel and Sophie arrived last, bearing expensive bottles of wine and wearing expressions of deep, feigned concern. They pulled me aside, asking in hushed tones how I was holding up. I just nodded and told them, "We'll talk after dinner." We all sat down at the long dining room table, 20 family members in all. The meal was a surreal performance. I listened as Daniel told a story about our childhood, his voice thick with a sentiment that I now knew was utterly fraudulent. I watched as Sophie praised Amanda's cooking, calling her the best sister-in-law a girl could ask for. The hypocrisy was so thick, I could taste it. Finally, after the dessert was served, I stood up, tapping my glass for a toast. The room fell silent. "I just wanted to thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady. "This year, I have a lot to be thankful for. But most of all, I'm thankful for the truth." I saw Daniel and Sophie exchange a nervous glance. "For 20 years, I continued, my eyes locked on theirs. I believed I was the head of 2 families, my wife and children, and my brother and sister. I have learned recently that one of those families has been a lie built on theft and betrayal." I then reached under the table and pulled out a stack of folders. I passed one to every member of the family. "Inside these folders," I said, as they began to open them, "you will find the financial records from my business for the last 2 decades. You'll see the invoices from a shell company called Gable Logistics, a company owned and operated by my brother, Daniel, and my sister, Sophie, a company they used to systematically steal $2.4 million from me." A collective gasp went through the room. My aunt dropped her fork. My uncle's face went white. Daniel and Sophie were frozen, their faces masks of pure, panicked horror. "But the money isn't the worst part," I said, my voice dropping, my gaze shifting to my wife, Amanda. "The worst part is that for 20 years, they have waged a secret war against this woman, my wife. They tried to corrupt her, to turn her into a thief like them. And when she refused, they spent 2 decades trying to destroy her, trying to poison my mind against her with lies and manipulations, culminating in this." I took out my phone and passed it down the table. On the screen was the photo they had sent me, and the string of texts accusing my wife of cheating. They sent me this last week, I said, in a final, desperate attempt to break a bond they could never understand. I looked at Daniel and Sophie. They were utterly exposed, their treachery laid bare for the entire family to see. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. You didn't just steal my money, I said, with a low voice. In addition to a dangerous growl, you tried to steal my life, my family. You tried to destroy the one person who has been more loyal to me than anyone. So here's my toast. I raised my glass. To Daniel and Sophie, get out of my house, and get out of my life. Forever. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, my uncle, their father, stood up, his face a mask of rage and shame, and pointed a trembling finger at the door. Daniel and Sophie stumbled from their chairs and fled, their public execution complete. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a profound sense of peace. I walked to my wife, took her hand, and looked at her, my heart filled with a love and admiration that was deeper than ever before. My greatest revenge wasn't in exposing them. It was in finally seeing the truth of the incredible woman who had been by my side, my silent warrior, all along. Our family wasn't broken. It had just been purified by fire, and we were stronger than ever. Have you ever had anyone try to ruin your marriage or your business? What did you do to secure your victory and expose the enemy? More people would love to hear from your experiences. Thank you all for listening to my story.